They say not all heroes wear uniforms. Some carry brushes, some carry burdens, and some walk among us unnoticed. Have you ever passed by someone and never imagined the weight of their silent story? Today I'll share with you the life of a woman who never sought recognition, yet her quiet hands once saved 27 souls from certain death. Stay with me, because this isn't just a story of courage. It's a reminder that even the most ordinary lives can leave extraordinary marks. If you believe such stories deserve to be heard, don't forget to follow, like, and share your thoughts. They say the quietest people often carry the loudest truths. Hannah Flores was 35, a woman most in town would have described as the painter lady. Her life was simple, almost invisible. No big car, no expensive clothes, no loud laughter in cafes. She lived in suburban Missouri, working job to job, painting fences, garages, spare rooms. Her face was often speckled with dots of paint she never bothered to scrub completely away, and her worn-out sneakers carried the stains of every color she had ever brushed onto a wall. People saw her, but few ever looked at her. Every Saturday morning she followed a ritual. She walked to the local bank, carrying a paper bag so old its edges had softened like cloth. To anyone else it looked like a sack for groceries, but to her it was the only safe place to hold the one thing she withdrew without fail: $500. The tellers knew her face but never her name. She was just the quiet woman who stood patiently in line, never complaining, never drawing attention. Her hands, calloused, cracked, with paint still embedded beneath her fingernails, told a story no one ever cared to ask about. That morning was no different, at least on the surface. Hannah waited her turn, stepped up to the counter, and spoke softly to the teller. 500, please, in 20s and 10s. She slid her ID across, eyes lowered. The man beside her, a well-dressed stranger with polished shoes and a self-satisfied smirk, chuckled under his breath. Carrying that kind of cash, huh? Must have hit the jackpot. His words dripped with sarcasm, the kind reserved for people who judge without knowing. Hannah didn't answer. She never did. She simply kept her gaze forward as the teller counted the bills. Behind the counter, two young employees whispered. Probably not clean money, one muttered. Look at her hands. But Emily, the teller serving Hannah, felt a pang of shame hearing that. She noticed the paint stains, the rough skin, and recognized honest labor rather than suspicion. She handed the money across the counter with quiet respect. Here's your withdrawal, Miss Flores. Hannah gave a small nod, tucking the bills carefully into her paper bag. She turned slightly, then hesitated. Almost as if remembering something, she reached into her jacket and slid a folded note across the counter. Could you make sure this gets to the right person? Her voice was barely above a whisper. She didn't wait for an answer, didn't ask for her receipt, didn't explain. She simply walked away, her steps steady, her figure blending once again into the background of an ordinary Saturday morning. Emily stared at the note. She intended to place it aside, maybe file it away later. But curiosity got the better of her. She unfolded the paper and froze. The words were brief, but their weight was undeniable. Urgent. If anyone from Unit 27B survived, please fax emergency code 093A to the number below. It was signed only with two initials, HF. Below the message was a fax number belonging to a regional military office. Emily's heart began to race. What if this wasn't a prank? What if it was real? She hesitated, then with trembling hands followed the instructions and sent the fax exactly as written. When the machine beeped to confirm transmission, she felt an odd mix of relief and dread. 12 minutes later, the sound of heavy engines rolled through the parking lot. Black SUVs with military plates appeared, their presence impossible to ignore. Within moments, armed personnel in civilian clothing but carrying the unmistakable weight of authority entered the bank. They carried papers stamped with official seals, ordering a lockdown of the entire building. Customers gasped, some clutching their phones, whispering urgently. Is this a robbery? One man asked in fear. Are we in danger? Another woman whispered. The atmosphere grew tense. Eyes darted from the tellers to the soldiers, then to the glass doors as if searching for escape. But the men and women who stepped inside did not shout, did not draw weapons. Their leader walked calmly to the counter, his expression not of anger but of relief. He carried an envelope in his hand, his demeanor composed yet purposeful. No one yet understood why. No one connected the arrival of military vehicles to the woman who had just left with a paper bag and a quiet smile. To them, Hannah was still only the paint-speckled stranger who withdrew small bills every month. But within the next hour, the truth would begin to unfold. A truth that would shake everyone present and reveal that the woman they dismissed so easily was far more than she seemed. And so the story begins, with an unnoticed painter, a paper bag, a folded note, and the arrival of soldiers whose lives were already bound to hers in ways the world had forgotten. The man who stepped forward carried himself with quiet authority. His jacket was simple, but a badge gleamed faintly on the chest pocket. Special Operations. He introduced himself as Major Gregory Hunt, his voice steady but touched with something deeper. Relief. He placed the envelope on the counter and looked around the tense room. Who sent a fax from here this morning? Emily, still shaken, slowly raised her hand. I did, but only because she asked me to. A customer left a note. I thought it might be important. Hunt nodded, not with suspicion, but with gratitude. You did the right thing. That customer is someone we've been searching for nearly a decade. She isn't just anyone. She's the reason I'm standing here today. The bank grew silent. Confused glances passed between customers and staff. Even the well-dressed man who had mocked Hannah earlier now sat up straighter, sensing something extraordinary. Emily hesitated. But she was just an ordinary woman, a house painter. She withdrew $500 and walked away. That's all. Major Hunt shook his head slowly. No, not just a painter. 9 years ago, during a training exercise gone wrong near a chemical plant, my unit, 27 soldiers, was trapped. Communications were jammed. Toxic fog leaked from the facility. We had no night vision, no gas masks. We were blind, moving closer to a containment area that would have killed us. His voice grew softer, tinged with the weight of memory. And then in the middle of the pong, arrows began to appear. White arrows painted on the ground, pointing the way out. The crowd listened in stunned silence. Hunt's eyes glistened, though he kept his composure. Someone was guiding us. Step by step, mark by mark, we followed those arrows until we reached safety. Whoever that person was disappeared into the night before we could even say thank you. We tried to find her. All we knew was that she worked with paint. Nothing more. Emily's breath caught. She remembered Hannah's hands, cracked, calloused, still stained with white paint. The pieces began to fit together in her mind. Her note today, she whispered. Yes, Hunt confirmed. It was her way of checking if we survived. She signed it HF. Hannah Flores, the painter who saved 27 lives that night. The revelation landed like thunder. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. The customers stared at each other, trying to reconcile the memory of a quiet woman with paint-stained clothes against the image of a hero who had saved an entire unit. The well-dressed man who had ridiculed her earlier leaned back in his chair, shame creeping across his face. Hunt opened the envelope he carried. Inside was the fax note, and beneath Hannah's urgent message, one more line written in her handwriting. I don't need thanks. I just want to know. Are you all still alive? Emily pressed a hand to her mouth, overcome. Hunt's voice grew gentle. We owe her more than thanks. We owe her our lives. Then another truth emerged, one even more astonishing. Hunt tapped the security footage displayed on his tablet, Hannah standing at the counter with her paper bag. Do you know why she withdraws exactly $500 every month? The bank manager shook his head. She's done it for years, always the 15th, always the same amount. Hunt's gaze grew solemn. Because that's the amount she has been sending, anonymously, to the widow of Sergeant Kevin Miller, the only soldier permanently injured that night. For 9 years, she has quietly supported his family, never revealed her name, never sought recognition. Emily gasped, and several customers covered their mouths in disbelief. The story of a quiet woman transformed before their eyes into something profound. The same well-dressed man who had mocked her now buried his face in his hands. His shoulders trembled, not from fear but from shame. Hannah's silence, her endurance, her persistence, it was more powerful than any wealth he had flaunted. As the realization spread, the bank felt less like a building of transactions and more like a place of revelation. Everyone in that room understood they had witnessed something rare, the unveiling of a hidden hero who never asked to be seen. Major Hunt's phone buzzed. He glanced at the message and exhaled. They have located her. She's on her way to Riverside Nursing Home to pay her mother's medical bills with the money she just withdrew. His voice softened. Even now, she isn't thinking of herself. She's thinking of others. The atmosphere shifted completely. Customers who moments earlier had eyed Hannah with suspicion now sat in reflective silence. Emily, clutching the note, felt a deep ache in her chest. She had misjudged Hannah too, quietly without words, but with the same assumptions as the others. And yet Hannah had been carrying the weight of extraordinary compassion all along. Some heroes announced themselves with medals and speeches. Hannah announced herself only with arrows of paint in the fog, a folded note across a counter, and the steady rhythm of $500 given month after month. And now, for the first time in 9 years, her secret was no longer her own. 15 minutes later, another military vehicle pulled up outside the bank. This one carried a passenger whose very presence silenced even the whispers. A distinguished older man stepped out, his hair silver, his frame slightly stooped by age, his gait slowed by a limp that spoke of old wounds. He was introduced quietly as Colonel James Mercer, the former commander of the unit Hannah had saved. Inside the bank, he was shown the security footage of Hannah withdrawing money that morning, paper bag in hand. His face, normally composed, crumbled as he watched. He removed his glasses and wiped at his eyes, voice breaking as he whispered, "That's her, the woman who painted the arrows, the one who saved my team." The room was silent as he steadied himself. He turned to the gathered crowd and spoke, his words carrying the weight of memory. We had gone nearly 2 miles in the wrong direction that night. Our radios were dead. The fog was so thick we couldn't see 3 feet in front of us. We were heading straight toward a ruptured chemical storage tank. If we had continued even another 100 yards, we would have never made it out. His hand trembled as he gestured. And then we saw them, white arrows appearing one by one in the mist, fresh paint. Someone was there with us, unseen, marking the safe way. He paused, the image still vivid in his mind. Those arrows led us to the extraction point. By the time we reached safety, whoever had painted them was gone. We searched, but she had disappeared into the night. At his signal, 2 soldiers stepped forward, carrying a small wooden box. They placed it gently on the counter. Inside lay a carefully folded American flag in the traditional triangle shape, and beneath it a bronze plaque engraved with the words, "Hannah Flores, Civilian Rescue Unit, Special Code 093A. Colonel Mercer's voice wavered. This recognition was approved years ago, but we could never find her to present it. It belongs to her, always has. The crowd leaned forward, some with tears in their eyes. Yet Hannah was nowhere to be found. She had already left the bank, walking the quiet streets toward Riverside Nursing Home, where her mother waited. That $500 she had withdrawn was not for herself, not for luxury, but to keep her mother's care secured for another month. The honor, the recognition, the applause, all of it remained behind her, as if she had never even heard her name spoken aloud. Outside the bank, news traveled quickly. Someone captured a photo of Hannah with her paper bag, unaware of the cameras. Within hours, it spread across social media under the hashtag number 500 for honor. Millions shared the image. Veterans wrote about anonymous acts of kindness they had once received from strangers. Families of soldiers expressed gratitude for a woman they had never met, but now admired deeply. Still, Hannah herself kept her distance. She declined all interviews, ignoring reporters who knocked at her door. The Pentagon sent her an invitation, offering formal recognition. Her handwritten response was displayed in newspapers nationwide. Please save that honor for those who returned home and for those who could not return at all. What I did required only paint. What they did required courage beyond measure. The letter, simple yet profound, was placed in the National Defense Museum. Next to it hung a recovered security photo from that fateful night, a grainy image of Hannah washing her hands near a paint can at the construction site. Visitors paused to read her words, many leaving with tears in their eyes. Back at the bank, the staff reflected on how quickly they had judged her. Emily replayed the morning in her mind, The soft voice, the folded note, the way Hannah had walked away without waiting to be thanked. The young man who had mocked her earlier now sat in stunned silence, ashamed of his careless words. He muttered softly, almost to himself, and I laughed at her, as if she was nothing. Major Hunt placed a hand on his shoulder, not in anger but in quiet admonishment. Remember this, sometimes the strongest people are the ones you overlook. Sometimes the ones carrying old paper bags carry heavier burdens than you'll ever know. The man nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I won't forget. The story was no longer just about a bank transaction or a faded paper bag. It had become a parable unfolding before their very eyes. A reminder that humility can outshine pride, that service can come from the unlikeliest of hands, and that recognition often finds those who never asked for it. And still, Hannah walked unseen, her footsteps carrying her away from applause, toward the quiet duty she had chosen long ago. While the world argued over medals and headlines, she remained what she had always been, a woman with paint-stained hands, living her life with a promise only she remembered. Hannah Flores never returned to that bank. For her, the incident was simply another Saturday, another withdrawal, another step in a life of routine. But for everyone else, she had become a symbol. Across the country, people were still sharing the photo of her with her paper bag, attaching their own stories of silent kindness with the hashtag #500 for honor. Veterans who had once been rescued in moments of chaos spoke of strangers who guided them. Families of soldiers wrote tributes, and ordinary people admitted to the times they had been helped quietly without ever learning the name of their benefactor. Meanwhile, Hannah herself carried on as though none of it mattered. She painted houses, walked home with her brushes and cans, and kept to her modest habits. But the world around her had changed. No longer did neighbors look at her with dismissive glances. On the sidewalks, people began to nod respectfully as she passed. Some even stopped to shake her paint-stained hands. They saw her now not just as the painter lady, but as someone who had carried greatness quietly without asking for acknowledgement. At the bank, where employees had once judged her for her appearance, a quiet transformation unfolded. Each teller kept a small photograph of Hannah at their stations, not displayed for customers, but tucked in as a private reminder. They never spoke of her openly, but their behavior changed. They no longer whispered assumptions about the clothes or hands of those who came to the counter. Instead, they treated every person as though there might be a story hidden behind a weary face. And each month, without fail, the bank allocated funds to a new foundation simply called HF, supporting the families of veterans, especially those affected by training accidents that rarely reach the news. But Hannah's giving did not stop there. When she learned that her mother's nursing home had received an anonymous donation covering 5 years of care, she quietly redirected her $500 elsewhere. One day she used it to buy art supplies for the Veterans Rehabilitation Center across town. Another month she handed it to a struggling neighbor without a word. Her money was never about herself. It was always about keeping someone else afloat. One morning she opened her front door to find 27 cans of white paint stacked neatly on her porch. No card, no explanation, no signature. She didn't need one. She knew exactly who had left them. The soldiers she had once saved had given her back the very tools she had used to rescue them: paint. Hannah carried the cans to the local VFW hall and began a project of her own. On a wide wall, she painted not soldiers, not weapons, not medals. Instead, she painted 27 white arrows, all pointing upward toward the sky. It was a simple mural, but its message was unmistakable. Direction, when direction is needed most. People came to see it, some with tears in their eyes, others in quiet reflection. When asked what it meant, Hannah gave the same humble answer. It's just a reminder. Everyone, at some point, needs to know where to go. The well-dressed man from the bank, who had mocked her so easily that morning, sought her out months later. He found her at a job site rolling paint across a garage door. His face was lined with regret, his eyes moist as he spoke. "I'm sorry," he confessed. "I laughed at you, judged you, dismissed you, and now my son, he just enlisted. I can't stop thinking about what you did, about what it means." Hannah put down her brush, reached into her pocket, and handed him a simple business card. On the back was a handwritten phone number. "If your son ever needs anything, Anything at all? This line goes directly to Major Hunt. Tell him Hannah sent you. The man's eyes filled with tears. He shook her hand, holding it longer than necessary, as though that single gesture might carry all the gratitude he could not express. Hannah said nothing more. She picked up her brush and continued painting. In the quiet of her world, she remained consistent. No interviews, no public speeches, no desire for applause. The media searched, reporters begged for her story, but she declined them all. When pressed, she gave only one line. I'm just someone who happened to have paint when paint was needed. That doesn't make me special. It just made me useful at the right moment. Her words spread almost as widely as the original photo, carried like a whisper of truth across a society hungry for examples of humility. And in time, her story settled, not as a trending topic, but as a quiet legend woven into the fabric of those she touched. The bank employees kept her note. Veterans told her story at gatherings. Children pointed at the mural of arrows and asked what it meant. And the answer was always the same: direction, hope, guidance. Hannah never asked to be a hero. She never wanted applause. But by walking away from recognition, she left something even greater: a legacy of quiet courage. Sometimes greatness doesn't come with medals or ceremonies. Sometimes it's a folded note on a counter, a path marked in white paint, a paper bag filled with $500. Sometimes it's simply keeping a promise made years ago. And in the end, the world did not remember her because she sought attention. They remembered her because she gave it all away, leaving arrows, so that others could find their way home.